Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take these really complex geopolitical and economic blueprints, the source material you've all shared with us, and really try to turn them into a clear picture of what's actually happening. Today, we're opening up a pretty radical proposal. It's Simone Smith-Godfrey's architectural vision for what she calls South Africa's Great Renaissance. And look, this is not just a slight adjustment to policy. The whole plan aims to fundamentally move the nation away from being a source of raw resource extraction, a system they argue is, colonial to achieving what they call sovereign authorship.
And that phrase, sovereign authorship, that's really the mission for you, our listener, today. It's about understanding just how radical this shift is. The source material is, well, it's very explicit. This isn't a reform. The document frames it as a complete sovereign audit, a full-scale renaissance. And it's all built on institutionalizing 8 key national resources. We're talking platinum, manganese, gold, rare earth elements. The goal is, well, it's simple, but it's immense. Reclaim control over the wealth from these resources for the nation and really for the continent.
Right, so if you look at the core challenge here, it's a total reframing of what value even is. How does a nation take its raw minerals, which the global market has for so long just treated as cheap commodities to be exported, and transform them into sovereign instruments? Instruments that are designed to rewire everything, the currency, the education system, even diplomacy.
It's a huge philosophical pivot. And it's not just rhetoric. The document uses some very heavy analytical tools, predictive modeling, complex regression analysis, to achieve a goal that has always seemed a bit abstract. They are trying to quantify things that have, for far too long been dismissed as intangible. Things like national dignity, economic agency, and continental authorship. They put real numbers on it.
Okay, so let's unpack this shift, because you can't really talk about economic sovereignty in 2024 without immediately talking about geopolitical conflict.
Oh, absolutely not. It's central to the whole thing.
The sources place South Africa at this absolute inflection point, navigating immense external pressure, specifically from what the blueprint calls the Western playbook. So threats and potential sanctions from the U.S. and the EU.
And it's important to understand the mechanism of that threat. It's not military.
Right.
It's financial strangulation. We're talking about attempts to cut off access to global credit, threats to really vital trade deals like AGOA.
The African Growth and Opportunity Act.
Exactly. And there's this constant diplomatic pressure that tries to paint South Africa as being part of some pariah camp because of its, its non-aligned stance on conflicts like Ukraine.
That pressure is very real. But what's so interesting is how the blueprint counters it. It reframes sanctions not as a threat of collapse, but as liberation.
Yeah, it's an audacious move.
The argument is that this Western punishment actually forces Africa to stop being just an input for other economies. It compels them to build their own systems and reclaim their agency much faster than they would have otherwise.
It's a classic geopolitical jujitsu move, really. If the West pulls back on banking and trade, the plan says this just accelerates the deployment of their own counter-levers. And the first one is financial independence, building a Pan-African clearing system to bypass things like SWIFT and keep trade, internal.
Okay, but that sounds incredibly risky. Bypassing global credit and SWIFT entirely, that's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
Does the blueprint address the immediate difficulty there with liquidity and trust?
It does, and that's why the other levers are so crucial. The second is diplomatic leverage. The strategy says South Africa must negotiate as part of a bloc, strengthening alliances like BRICS plus
Not
CRA.
just much larger now.
Much larger, and aligning with the broader global South Asian Latin America. They believe that critical mass provides the necessary insulation.
But the real power, the engine for this entire shift, according to the sources, is the third lever, the mineral leverage itself.
This is the key.
Western industry, the EU, the US, Japan, it just can't sustain itself without South Africa's resources. We're talking about 80% of the world's manganese, huge reserves of platinum, chromium, rare earths, all indispensable for everything from green tech to defense.
And that very dependence is what gives them the authority to make this pivot. They use a really powerful metaphor in the source material to explain this. The youngest brother analogy.
Right.
For decades, South Africa has been treated like the junior sibling in the global economic family. It's just expected to obey the rules set by the older brothers, the US, Australia, the EU.
But the insight is that this youngest brother, while maybe junior in status, actually holds the mineral inheritance.
Exactly, the very thing that sustains the older siblings' wealth and their high standard of living.
So the source argues that sanctions aren't really about discipline, it's a shakedown for minerals.
And by recognizing that, the youngest brother becomes the pivot point. What was seen as a weakness, resource dependence, becomes a source of genuine sovereign strength.
So that's the why, the geopolitical necessity.
Which brings us to the how, the specific mechanism to actually build this sovereignty, and the core of that is what they call the 12-pillar framework.
So if the geopolitics forces the country to build its own house, this framework is the architectural blueprint for it, the engine that converts raw mineral value into permanent self-sustaining infrastructure. So tell us more.
Well, it's comprehensive. It covers 12 different areas of the economy, everything from setting prices to managing intellectual property and education. Its function is dual. It systematically replaces the old colonial logic. Dig it up, ship it out with a new sovereign logic. Value has to be captured and recycled at home.
Okay, so let's walk through some of the key pillars, starting with the control mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
Pillar 1 is the commodity desk.
Right, and this desk isn't just about selling things. Its role is to stabilize prices, to coordinate all the exports, and negotiate strategic long-term contracts. The whole focus is on reducing volatility.
And there's data on this, right?
Mhm. There is, and it's striking. The analysis in the blueprint on institutionalizing platinum shows a 0.72 inverse correlation with rand volatility.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't statisticians, what does that actually mean in practice?
It means simply that when the platinum desk is operating as designed, the national currency, the rand, becomes significantly more stable against global markets. The platinum itself becomes a monetary stabilizer, not just a source of fluctuating cash.
So stability is step 1. Step 2 must be permanence, which brings us to pillar 2, the sovereign wealth fund.
Exactly. This is where the mineral profits are turned into institutional permanence, into intergenerational equity. You don't just spend the money, you anchor it to future infrastructure.
And it's earmarked for specific industries.
Precisely. For example, the rents from platinum are channeled directly into a dedicated hydrogen sovereign fund. That fund is then mandated to finance the entire hydrogen infrastructure, build out electrolyzers, fuel cell deployment, pipelines. The profit from the mined resource is perpetually reinvested into the next industrial corridor.
And, of course, you can't have financial sovereignty using someone else's tools. So that brings us to pillar 6, the sovereign currency suite.
Right. This introduces new resource-backed financial instruments to cut down on dependency on foreign exchange. This is where it gets a little complex, but the idea is clear. Gold, for instance, is reframed as a direct anchor for what they call GOLX bonds.
So like a treasury bond, but backed by physical gold instead of just government debt.
That's a good way to think of it. It's anchored to a tangible asset.
And the blueprint also models this for diamonds with instruments like DIAX and LGDX. What's the function there? Why use diamonds for liquidity?
So the diamond instruments are mainly for managing liquidity, especially in regional trade corridors. The modeling shows that using these can reduce what they call corridor volatility by about 38%.
And corridor volatility is basically the price fluctuation when you trade between, say, South Africa and Kenya.
Exactly. The risk involved in cross-border trade. By using these mineral-backed instruments, it stabilizes the value of that regional trade. It allows African nations to transact with a lot less risk and without constantly converting everything through the US dollar.
That's a huge move to insulate regional trade. But sovereignty isn't just financial instruments, it's also about people. Which brings us to pillars 4 and 8, the SME framework and the guilds.
Yes, and this is crucial. The focus here is on credentialing labor and creating founders, not just employees. The guilds and trade schools, like the planned platinum guilds, are the engine for this. They certify high-level skills, training people in everything from hydrogen maintenance to jewelry design and industrial automation.
So the state doesn't just train workers.
Mm-hmm.
It institutionalizes that skill through a guild, and that credential then links the person directly to the industrial corridors and the equity structure.
That's it, exactly. The system ensures that the people doing the work automatically own a piece of the new economy through their certified credentials. Ownership becomes an institutional fact, not just a slogan. It's a complete overhaul of the ownership structure.
Okay, now we have to scale this up. We've talked about the national mechanism, but the ambition here is continental. The sources argue that Africa's past industrial policies failed because of a structural mismatch. They were applying, European or U.S. discipline-based frameworks
which are designed for manufacturing economies that don't have primary resources.
onto Africa's fundamentally resource-based economy.
Right. They needed a model that uses the resources as the anchor for industrialization, not as something to just sell off. And the forecasted gains from this new model are, well, they show the scale of the ambition. Over 10 years, the blueprint projects are 12.7 trillion in recoverable economic value.
That number is staggering. That's what, about two-thirds of South Africa's current GDP?
Roughly, yes. It's a transformative figure.
And the human impact numbers are just as big. In terms of labor and equity, the plan projects 9.7 million direct jobs.
And 28 million indirect beneficiaries across African Union corridors.
Just to put 9.7 million jobs in perspective for you, that's more than the entire current workforce of many medium-sized European nations.
And crucially, that institutionalization part means it's not just about paychecks. The plan projects 12.4 million new equity holders through those SME and guild frameworks. It ties job creation directly to institutional ownership.
So this isn't just a South African plan. The document calls it a continental choreography. The whole model is designed to be replicated.
That is the key strategic insight here. South Africa isn't just offering to sell its resources. It plans to export the entire operational system for resource sovereignty. They intend to replicate these tools, the curriculum, the treaty frameworks, the financial dashboards, across at least 12 other AU member states: Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Ethiopia, Mozambique.
And you can see that in the corridors they've proposed. For example, linking the platinum corridors, which are all about hydrogen, to Namibia and Botswana.
Right. Or deploying the manganese corridors essential for fertilizers and EV batteries into nations like Kenya and Ghana. That continental integration ensures the raw materials aren't just shipped off the continent. They're embedded into regional manufacturing and processing ecosystems. The sovereign funds build the infrastructure, the research hubs absorb the tech, and the trade schools supply the skills, all at the same time. It builds a shared destiny.
Okay, let's wrap up this deep dive. We've unpacked this really radical shift from extraction to sovereign authorship. We've looked at the geopolitical leverage South Africa holds, and we've detailed the specific mechanisms of the 12 pillars designed to rewire the economy.
And if we just connect it back to the big picture for you, the core message is clear. Institutionalization transforms resources from volatile commodities, from sources of external control, into instruments of real strategic resilience, national dignity, and equity across the continent.
So what does this all mean for you and for the wider world? The source material closes with a profoundly provocative geopolitical thought. The success of this South African Renaissance, where the majority institutionalizes its own resources, is framed as a signal of global hope. It's meant to prove that national and continental revival is possible. And in the author's own words, it whispers to indigenous peoples in the settler states, revival is possible.
It really forces you to consider the global relevance of these regional economic blocs and how a shift to resource-backed sovereignty using these new kinds of mineral-backed bonds and regional currencies could fundamentally redefine the power dynamics between the global north and the global south. We'd encourage you to explore how these models are being developed well beyond the traditional Western financial systems.